Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. I'm Leisa Grace Wilson, your host. And today I've got David Harkin with me. He is the CEO of 8 Billion Ideas. Yep, there it is.
There it
But
is.
we're going to talk about that, but we're not only going to talk about that. We're talking about his newly released book, The Ripple Effect. Can you see it behind me up there? Yep. So The Ripple Effect is a book he's written recently that I got my hands on that book at the BSME conference in Dubai recently. And I started to flip through it, lots of little gems in there, lots of ideas. So I thought, why not get David on the pod to speak to educators about the ripple effect, creating ripple effects, positive ripple effects, and a little bit more. Why 8 billion ideas? Why did we move from 7 to 8? Because I remember when the company was actually 7 billion ideas and now we're 8. So we're going to maybe look at that a little bit later. But David, welcome. It's nice to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And I love seeing the book on your shelf. It looks fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do get quite a lot of books to read. People do, but I like when I choose them, and I chose the book. So that's a good thing, right? Yeah, I think it is. Tell us a little bit about you, David.
My name is David Harkin. I am a CEO of 8 Billion Ideas, which is on a mission to give students the skills and belief to go change the world. But I've always felt I've got multiple hats on because first and foremost, I am a dad. I've got 3 boys at home, a new baby, which is 3 weeks old, called Ben. I've got a 3-year-old called Harry, and I've got a 5-year-old called Toby. So I've got 3 boys at home and married to my gorgeous wife, Jenny. So I'm a husband and a dad, very much foremost first. But I, as the CEO of 8 Billion Ideas, I'm just so passionate about our work in education. So it kind of dad, entrepreneur, passionate educationalist, but I've always felt I've had a different view of the world because before becoming an entrepreneur and a business owner, I worked in the corporate space as well. And I've always felt those kind of 4 spinning hats have given me different perspectives. I've often seen things from different angles, which have helped our work in education. And with the book, there was just lots of things I've learned on that journey, from being a kind of corporate intrapreneur to becoming an entrepreneur over the years. And I've often shared little nuggets of stories, or in coaching sessions, given a bit of advice. And after doing a couple of TEDx talks a few years back, people kept on asking me about a book, and being dyslexic, I hadn't written a book or considered it. And that's when the idea kind of kicked off. So I'd like to think I'm brilliantly busy. I love what I do, and just very blessed to be here right now.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out. I was just listening to all the hats you wear, and I was like, he's got 3 boys. By the way, when I heard of the book, your wife had just given birth, and I thought maybe he's got a girl in there somewhere. But it didn't happen.
Start the book. It's dedicated to my wife, Toby, Harry, and Bump, because we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl until, and I couldn't go to the BSME conference, so I sent her a little video. Just I needed to be based at home, just in case the baby was born. So no, it was definitely a boy, and yeah, a dad of lads.
That's good. I don't have girls myself. I'm always wishing it on everybody else. I'm a mother to boys, and I love my boys, but I always wish a girl for my husband. That won't happen, obviously, at my age and stage. My boys are 10 this year. They're twin boys, and they're 10 this year.
Excellent, fantastic. Keeping you busy.
Oh gosh, yes. Busy and happy. They're great lads. They're big rugby lads, and they're great lads, but no girls. So with all the stuff that you have to do, you decided to write a book. Why?
Yeah, I did. I guess it started when I had the opportunity back in 2018. I did a TEDx talk. So I was always fascinated with TEDx growing up, and watching the kind of Ken Robinsons and the Simon Sinek's, and those kind of talks really kind of changed my opinion on lots of different things. And then when there was an opportunity to do a TEDx talk in London, I kind of applied, went through the process, and did a talk, Can a 4-year-old change the world? And absolutely loved it. And I said to the TEDx organizers at the time, if in the future you find in the last days or weeks of a future TEDx event, you need a speaker. I'm often talking about different kind of topics, just getting contact. And given most of the TEDx processes take 6 to 9 months, you get whittled down. I kind of never expected to get the opportunity to do it again. But I got a call 10 days before an event in London, and because they'd sold like 1,000 tickets, you know, they need to make sure they've got speakers which could go on the stage. And they said, do you fancy doing it at short notice? And I didn't really question. I just said yes. But I was doing a lot of writing at the time around attitude and mentality. So I put together quite quickly, in all honesty, a talk about how can we all embrace a world-class mentality. And it was nothing to do with, you know, on the face of it, it didn't look like anything to do with what my business does on a day-to-day basis. But I kind of finished the talk and got off stage, and then a number of people kind of were really fascinated about some of the things that I talked about, particularly that kind of the attitude, the ripple effects, how you kind of switch on every single day. And were asking me about a book, and I just said I haven't done it yet. An ambition way down the line that maybe I'll do that when I've got time, or, you know, a bit retired or whatever it might be. And I actually thought maybe the time is now, or it could be now. And given that I'd prepared quite a lot of keynotes, and I actually had done some blogs and articles, the first thing I did was I kind of printed them all off. And I said, there is a common theme here. I like talking about attitude. I like talking about innovation. I like talking about mentality. There's a theme of stuff here. So I'm not really starting from scratch. I just got to work out what could be the book about, what I want the book to be about, and the impact of the book. Because I've always felt that whenever you're talking or you're presenting, or indeed if you write stuff down, it's a privilege if someone is listening or reading it, particularly a book. You know, people are reading it in their free time. That it's a real privilege to enter that. So there's got to be a strong takeaway. So the first thing first was just before the pandemic kicked in, because I was at Guest Dubai, February 2020, flew home because we're based in London. We operate around the world, but landed, and then the world went into chaos. But around that time, I even think on the flight home, I was just like literally notepad and pen, thinking about different chapters about the flow. And I thought, right, that could be quite a good book. Pandemic hit, obviously a very challenging time. And once the business, you know, protecting the business was the first priority, and supporting our schools in a different kind of way, there became this little opportunity, which was a bit odd for a very busy business owner, of a little bit of reflection, a little bit of time back when the world was kind of pausing. And I kind of was putting my energy into writing at that time. So, you know, it started really middle of 2020. It was then the next 12, 15 months of trying to get the chapters all aligned, a nice structure throughout the book, and then constantly revisiting it. So it was born out of the TEDx. It was born out probably a decade plus of a fascination of marginal gains, attitude, innovation, whatever it might be. And then taking a big step back and thinking, what do I want the book about? Who's it for? What are the takeaways going to be? And I was just desperately keen for it to be a light but informative read with some helpful tips for any self-improver, really, no matter wherever they are on their journey in their career. And hopefully that's been achieved.
It has. So I read the book and I liked it. I liked it because, not because it presented any massively groundbreaking ideas. No, I liked it because it presented ideas that we should be cognizant of in a very simple, very easily understood way. And I love the fact that at the end of every chapter, or what you called levels, you brought it all together. So you kind of have this whole bringing it all together section, which is very useful. It's the teacher in me. Like, I feel like once you've introduced the concept and you've explained and you've expounded on it, then the next thing to do is to bring it all together. And that is what you did in the book. And I thought, well, that was quite nifty, because if you want to ever revisit the ideas, you don't have to read the entire thing. You just go back and you just check on those sort of summaries, if you like, of the chapters or the levels in the book. Talk about why you chose levels over chapters.
Exactly that kind of reason. Why it was kind of, I felt like all the levels could stand alone by themselves. Because whether or not you're talking about being brilliantly busy, or making your mark, or being constantly curious and creative and curious, I felt like each of those were kind of standalone levels and topics by themselves. So if you've got an issue in a particular area, you could dive back into level one. sometimes with the chapter approach, you are building, and of course there is a thread there, but if you're reliant on the chapter before or after, or to refresh your memory or go back, it can be a little bit difficult. And I've always felt it kind of gives the right tone, right? I'm going to really concentrate on this level this year. Like, because you could pick your own development plan in this particular space. Like, you take being brilliantly busy. That was something like I kind of just coined when I was in a conversation with people. People always say that they're busy, but they say it in such a negative way. And it just always annoyed me. It's just like, if you're negatively busy, then change, do something different. But if you just think about that language and the ripple it has, everybody just thinks you're busy, you're closing yourself off from conversation and ideas. It can be quite groundbreaking. So stop saying it in the wrong kind of way. And I know when people read the book, it could be that chapter, it could be another chapter, it could be, another level on that, put the chapter word in, and they're going to go back to it. So I felt it was just, because they all could be standalone, that was why we went for the level approach.
Yeah. You kept touching on my favorite part of the book, which is being brilliantly busy. And I'm like, don't kill it before we start.
Sorry.
I want to talk about that because I've put that there as my favorite chapter of the whole book. I love it. But I'm going to take you back to level 1, David, because I'm going to talk about creating ripples. Because I think as educators, we know we have an impact. We know that the work we do has long-reaching effects, but we never sort of think of it as ripples. So how, as a teacher, right, because our audience are teachers, how can they ensure that they're creating positive ripples always?
Well, it's teaching is that, if you think about it now, the rest of the world has had to catch up in the way that teachers, daily perform, right? You're teaching in the classroom, but you have to bring your A game in every single day and switch on. And you know what? It can be exhausting, isn't it? Just, I've got an audience. My audience is my classroom. I've got to make sure I bring my best attitude. Now, the rest of the world is catching up on that because they are now behind the screen more than ever before. So when someone might have been working home or in the office, you've got to switch on for a meeting, right? Rather than switch on for 5 or 6 hours worth of meetings where you've got to bring your big attitude. Teachers have had to do this for decades, and it's incredibly hard. But for me, it's about an appreciation, right? I think it starts with that all of us make ripples. Some of us have ripples which make bigger ripples, particularly in teaching, right? We might have 25, 35, different class sizes around the world, 20 to 30 children in each lesson. We might see over 100 to 120 children every day. We might do an assembly. We might talk to 20 or children in the corridor. We go into the staff room. Your attitude could touch 200, 250 people on a daily basis without even trying. And when you go, wow, okay, actually, my effect is not me just going into my classroom, doing my job and leaving. Actually, I'm going into my classroom, I'm interacting in this community. There are hundreds of people that I'm meeting on a daily basis before I even talk about your own friendship groups and network groups that are going to be affected about my attitude, okay? So once you start thinking like that, you go, okay, maybe what I need to do is just think about it. Just like I want to be a better teacher, I want to be a better public speaker. How do I have a better attitude every day? Well, first, it's an appreciation of the people that you touch. Secondly, it then comes to kind of small techniques, okay? How do you switch on every day without fail from the moment that you wake up to that first interaction? And if you're a teacher, that first lesson or that first interaction, not even lesson, sorry, that first interaction with a student, which will happen before your lessons. It'll be when you're in the car park, getting out of your car, or in the corridor, walking to your form room, or whatever it might be. Because every conversation has the ability to create ripples. And in education, every conversation has the ability to change a child's life, right? We forget that sometimes, how much of a role model our teachers are. And it's a really interesting one. When you ask a lot of adults, 10, 20, 30 years out of education, tell me about the most memorable moments when you were at school. Most of them are not lessons in the classrooms, but conversations with teachers or assembly, an outside speaker, or a teacher coming up at the playground. That's when ripples are genuinely made. So it's about an appreciation and then your own little techniques to switch on. Right now, I'm fascinated about my warm up, like a little bit like, how do I warm up for the day every single day? I was thinking like Usain Bolt, like the world's best ever runner. He wouldn't just run a 100-meter sprint without warming up. So why would I not warm up when I'm trying to be my best version every single day? So an appreciation and considering your own little warm-up routines or self-talk routines or whatever it might be to go, got my A game. I'm going to give it my best shot every single day of the week. And you think like that, it's surprising what your positive rippled attitude can have on your students, your peers, the parents. It's infectious. Okay. It really genuinely is.
Yeah. I remember in the book I was reading about like the count, you know, like how many people your ripple affects. And I was like, oh my God, I bet a teacher on a given day would be affecting, like by extension, thousands.
Thousands. I remember having a conversation with a head teacher a number of years ago, and her take on it was, when you're a CEO of school, a head of a school, your big job actually is managing emotion in that environment, that you're managing students, you're managing staff, and you're managing parents, and you're managing maybe owners or governing bodies, these kind of four crazy spinning plates, and the culture and the emotion that you build and your ripples. If I come in as a bad mood, that's going to be infectious in the wrong way, because you can make negative ripples. If you come in a bad mood, how are your students gonna learn from you or want to learn from you? And the ripples there could be life changing. So that little appreciation, I think it just helps with that switch. And it doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it's easy at all. It doesn't mean you're not going to have bad days when you're just in a bad mood, or you just lose you lose sight of that. But I think the more conscious of you are, you're going to certainly have less bad days than good days. No, that's going to be right. You'll have less.
You'll have less bad days.
More good days.
More good days.
Get it. We got to get it right.
You did it right. You said it right.
Yeah.
You said it right. You said it right. I tell you what I also thought about when I was reading that chapter was the fact that the ripples don't disappear as easily. So, you make that analogy of the water. And obviously we're at the river. I'm Caribbean. So obviously from the shores, we go and we play in the water. We toss ripples and we watch it go out. But in life, it's not as easy as it is with water. Because with water, another wave comes or another tide, and it all smooths out. But the ripples we have in life, especially as an educator, are so much more longer lasting. Yeah. And so we have to sort of that's what I kept thinking when I read it. Like, we have to be careful of creating negative ripples, because those could be going on for decades and generations, and we don't even know, because they've rippled so far out that we're no longer aware that we were the ones who created them in the first place.
I mean, you're 100% right. Like, and this is where it can be difficult, right? Just that wrong sentence or said in the wrong way could be misinterpreted, and someone has an opinion about their own ability for the next few decades, and you don't even realize it, because every single day as an educator, you might be having hundreds of those conversations. And where I kind of flip it in the fact that this is such a privilege, though. It's such a privileged industry. It's such a wonderful, amazing industry that on the flip side, you have the ability to create lifelong positive ripples on every child that you engage with and speak to. Like, every day is an opportunity to create memorable moments in education. So you're dead right. There's the potential that something you do will make negative ripples, and hopefully those negative ripples can be squashed. Like, by the end of the day, sometimes they might last a little bit longer, sometimes they might last a lifetime. But on the flip side, don't fear that. I think if you embrace the fact that you have the ability to literally change a child's life daily, never lose sight of that, right? Because if you lose sight of that, then it's not the right sector to be in. But if you go, I'm loving my job, I'm going to give it my best shot, I'm going to make as many positive ripples, but that's what we should be doing. It's not easy, but if we can do that, then it makes your life easier, and indeed the children that you interact with, so much easier and helpful.
For sure. And in that chapter, you talked a little bit about building your personal brand, and that also being a part of it. Talk to me a little bit more about how educators can do that.
Yeah, and it's really important. I have these conversations with my coach constantly. Like, a brand is, it sounds a bit bad, but fundamentally, a brand is, what does someone say about you behind your back, right? What is people's perception of you? And you can own your brand, right? You can make sure that you understand what your values are. You're living and breathing them in two ways: in the people that you interact, in the way that you engage, and equally reinforced in the digital world and your kind of LinkedIn profiles and what you're talking about and what you're passionate about. And I think it's being conscious of that at the end of the day, we all should be very proud of our achievements in our careers. I talk about that in Making Your Mark. I find it remarkable how many people go through their lives and forget about what they've achieved, or they've done a whole academic year and say, like, it's another year of teaching. Well, what have you done? And they can't actually remember like the key things that they've done, even though they've done a lot. You should be very proud of that and gradually building that brand in a positive way. It's not about being arrogant. It's not about being overconfident. It's just about being proud of what you've achieved. And that's why I talk about the kind of Christmas CV in one of the chapters. It's like looking ahead for me, what do I want to achieve in the next year? What do I want to look back? And then being proud of those achievements. And it's how it's helping me with my developing brand as an individual. Teachers on the whole, LinkedIn, we've seen a change in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, the vast majority of I think educationists probably didn't really understand the power of LinkedIn and what it could do for one's career while they're at school and their future career. So we've seen a big change. We've seen a big change in education using it, which is fantastic. And I encourage more people to do it. Because if you know how to build the digital brand, you know what you want to stand for, your values, then fundamentally it helps the students that you're engaged in, but it also creates opportunities as well, opportunities for you and opportunities for others, particularly amazing platforms like LinkedIn. Conversations like this wouldn't be possible like 10 years ago, but we've connected and having an exciting, vibrant kind of conversation. So it should be important to everybody, personal branding. Like if you're not worried about your personal brand and what, your impact on others, then I just find that, to me personally, a little bit bizarre, because we should be worried about, what our impact on our schools and our communities, and we should want them to be positive, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we sure should. I'm a proponent. Like, I always talk about people building their personal brand, whether that's on social or offline. I find teachers increasingly doing that now. Earlier, it wasn't a thing that they do, but now I think teachers are coming into that space and carving out their little niches and doing their thing. So yeah, I do agree with you. But what I wanted to find out from you, though, is how then do they stand out, right, from all the sort of negative things that can come at you from social? Because I'm telling you, on Twitter, I don't know if you're on Twitter, but Twitter can be very, very stressful.
You know what? Twitter's got it's got an opinionated educationist audience, right? You definitely have that. It surprises me sometimes the tone that people are prepared to take, particularly in a professional industry, particularly in education. Look, I'll split this between the two, because what I would do is start on LinkedIn, which is a much more professional platform than any other. I'd certainly start there. In terms of how you differentiate yourself, you first take care of your actual profile, simple things like headshot, cover photo, background. But then as you go through your career, I get frustrated when people just list kind of jobs they've done. I kind of want to know, well, what did you do in that job? What was the, not just the actual results of leading a department or being a deputy head, but the extra stuff, the extracurricular programs, projects you ran. That's kind of like intro stuff. Like that's personal branding 101, I would say. The second step here is, how do you start to differentiate yourself? Might get opinion, but blogging, article, teachers have got amazing things that they're doing in the classroom, got great opinions about the future of education, but very few people are comfortable about writing a 500 blog, mainly because they say, I don't have time, right? And I'll go, well, don't give me that excuse, right? To write a 500 word blog probably takes 30 minutes to get your ideas out, and then go back and revise it and go back and publish it, right? It literally, start writing. And actually, when you start writing, you might start finding some common themes, but to the rest of the world observing you on platforms like LinkedIn, you are moving into a thought leadership position. You are moving to someone who is not just an educationalist. You're a passionate educationalist by taking the time just to write a little bit. So those would be my two. Just do the basics on LinkedIn. Start using the article feature on LinkedIn. Don't think you're going to get, or don't do it to get likes or get comments or whatever it might be. See it as building your brand over a couple of years. And and good things will come. People, people will reach out to you. If you're going to jump into the scary world of Twitter a little bit, probably observe and watch a little bit. There's so much good stuff there. Follow some of the big education accounts, observe, positively comment, and, don't be shy of putting stuff out there, but just learn what happens on Twitter a little bit. But it does constantly surprise me, particularly on Twitter. I feel like some of the profession forgets that they're in a profession, and they drop their guard, and they're way more blunt than they would be to a fellow educationist if they're in the same room.
Yeah.
That's right.
I want to take the conversation a little bit in another direction. I know we're talking about the ripple effect, we're talking about the book, but 8 billion ideas, and you work with schools. I want to find out from you, what do you think are some of the issues, the big issues within the education space that we need to be paying attention to right now?
Okay. Yeah, this is an interesting one, because I've got an idea for a second book, which is kind of focused on if only I had every educationist in the world work for me for a day, what would I do? And I just had to pose that question over a dinner conversation with a head teacher once, and it was really interesting, because it was like, how do you solve some of these big issues? Like, there are 100 million people working in education every single day globally. That is just a phenomenal amount of people with ideas, with opinions, with problem solving. The challenge we have is the transfer of knowledge and innovation within the sector, because it goes back to it being a brilliantly busy environment and being a competitive sector as well. If you compare education to sectors such as aviation, right, or elite sport, where like kind of marginal gains are like seeked in advance, and aviation in particular, if there's a benefit in an idea or a small improvement, everybody knows about it. We don't have those infrastructures. We do not have those systems in space in education at all. So our biggest problem is the transfer of knowledge. Is number one. The second biggest problem is not understanding the importance of the theory of marginal gains, so that the tiny and the small ideas do count. There is a complete lack of acknowledgement on the whole, and this is not in every environment, but so many people don't even know what the definition of a marginal gain is, right? Which is that small incremental improvement which can add up. And the reason why there's such a lack of acknowledgement there is because it's so busy, there's so much time going on, and those small ideas being done, people don't necessarily see the big impact of it. So they go, okay, I've done that little thing, David. Another 1,000 little things aren't going to make a big difference. And that's the problem, because we're not listening or creating proper ways of innovating globally together. And because we haven't got the environments to capture and implement those small marginal gains, how are we going to advance education to where we want it to be? So focus on those two different areas. We've got 100 million people. All the problems in education could be solved if we create environments where people can listen, can properly share innovation, and we appreciate the tiny ideas actually make a big, big difference.
There's a lot there.
Loads there. I needed a mic drop. I needed a little mic drop.
No, there's a lot there, David.
Walk off the podcast. I'm off.
No, you're on. Staying on. Come on. No, here's the thing, right? How do we create that sharing? You mentioned aviation. How are they doing it?
Well, what happens is they have their policies in place, because if planes crashes, people die. And, it's not acceptable for one airline not to share a safety protocol with another airline. So as soon as there's any improvements in software or tech, the whole aviation industry through their associations know about it and is implemented across the world. So there's a complete understanding there. So the infrastructures exist. We are, look, speaking frankly, and it's nobody's fault, we're just decades behind in this particular space. I think we've just got to wake up and realize that the transfer of knowledge is the biggest problem here. How do we have, you got 100 million people who know what to do, can share ideas, schools all around the world doing amazing things, but they're just not transferred. It's just, that's what we've got to concentrate on. It probably starts, in the first instance at a school level, right? It's got to start with, how do we build a culture of transferring knowledge within our school, right? And ideas around it. You're then going into clusters of schools, or indeed regions of schools, right? Which is sharing those ideas. And in those kind of conversations, it needs to not just be the big breakthrough ones, but that real celebration of marginal gains at a lower level. You're then going bigger geography, and then you're going globally. But it's got to start in the school. This is a 20, 30, 40, 50-year movement for this to actually happen.
Yeah. You know, marginal gains and education really are juxtaposed. I'm telling you right now, as a former head teacher, they don't mix, period. Why? Because we're in a very results-driven sector, which has no time for you to tell me there was a 0.001 increase in students' attainment, or even that there was no movement in attainment, but there was an attitudinal shift. The attitudinal shift would probably have the biggest impact on the child, but we don't measure that. That's not reported. And so we can't use that. So for us to take marginal gains as something that we should work towards, we need a whole system shift. Like everything has to change.
I can guarantee you, literally, I would put my house on the line that if we embrace this, I'd think within a year, every teacher across the planet would have half a day's time back. I genuinely believe it, a week. Like, I believe that marginal gains exist, process improvement needs to be adopted. I believe the complete lack of appreciation of time. We use the words, we're busy, there's no time, but like nobody is seeking if I can save every member of staff 5 minutes a day, that's half an hour a week, right? Or nearly half an hour a week, substantial amount of time. But those little improvements around time, we go, oh, can't do that, can't do this, can't do this. No, let's just go do that stuff. Let's just go fix that stuff. You'll be absolutely surprised that when you start embracing this theory, what happens is you start to see the big impact. So yeah, I completely agree, because we're results driven, because there's lots of different reasons. There's governments around the world which are ranking schools. There's parent expectations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse, right? It's got to start at some point, right? People have got to believe in it. And people have got to go, what am I going to do in my culture? What am I going to go do in my school now to make sure it's an environment where we can genuinely listen? Yes, that might be how we're ranked, but we're going to create our own system. We're going to look at ways that we are innovating. We're going to celebrate the small ideas, and it's got to start somewhere to create our own ripple in this industry. So I completely get it, but there has to come a point when the line is drawn with excuses given about why we can't do it. The results are shown in every other industry around the world. Education can do it, and we've got to take some steps to make sure we start listening to those small and tiny ideas, because they can solve the issues, right? If we can create time, we can become better teachers, right? We can have more time being creative. We can spend more time in the classroom doing what we want. We can spend more time on ourselves, improving ourselves, that well-being, have a little bit of rest, not running from lesson to lesson, out of lunch and away. It can be done. We've got to start.
Yeah, I think where you come in as someone who works complementary to education with students, it's a nice position. And I'll tell you why. I don't think you're from an education background, as in you weren't a teacher. And so the system hasn't beaten it out of you, which is great, which means you are coming and you're looking at it with fresh, optimistic perspective. And teachers who are in the system, I think a lot of them have had the hope beaten out of them. And so talk to me about how they can become positively relentless in making sure this change really happens.
Yeah, look, my background is, I was a history grad, went and worked in IBM. I was on the director's path, big technology giant, became an entrepreneur in education. But over the years, we've built up our reach into working with over 500 schools in every part of the sector. So what I mean by that is we work with international schools, we work with local schools in the UK, grammar schools, colleges, young offenders. I've literally, psychiatric hospitals, I've had the pleasure of working with students in every learning environment. The consistency to me is every child I've ever met has an amazing imagination. I'll never change from that position, but every child is on a different journey with the skills and beliefs that they've got. The second part of that is because of that exposure of seeing schools around the world, I've seen the innovation which is occurring in all parts of the globe, and I just have a huge appreciation for what's going on. I've also, been in schools all the time. I know how busy it is. I know how tiring a school day can be. Yes, I'm not in the same school every single day repeatedly, where maybe it's being drummed out of people, and that's the difference. So what do we do about it, right? There's two people responsible about it. It's not just about the system or the head or whatever. As an individual, we've got to keep going back to, why did I jump into this? Why did I want to be a teacher? You've got to make sure that you're lighting your fire every single day, have your own goals, find your self-drive with what you want to achieve with your students. And that often comes with your clear goal setting, right? Not the next job, not the next step up in pay. What do I want to achieve with my students this academic year, this term, this week? Just get relentless in your positive goal setting. That's number one. It has to start with the individual's responsibility and not looking for somebody else to constantly supply that ambition. But on the second hand, whoever's in charge of that school is fundamentally the most important person for the culture of the school. People often ask me, where would I send my children? Right. From what I've seen, the first thing I do is, who's the head of the school? Can I look them in the eye? Can I understand what their values are? Because they have a ripple down there. And if you are in that leadership position, your ripples are bigger than anybody in that school, right? Your attitude and your approach, you have so much responsibility, but fundamentally your responsibility is to bring your best attitude and mentality into the workplace every day. And secondly, create an environment where innovation can flourish. And it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't read a book and it just happens. It's got to be that relentless, but positive, relentless commitment to it. And it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if you do that, and you've got the ambitious self-improver, goal-setted teacher who's going to find the light in every moment and keep pushing forward, and you've got the leaders in that school making sure that they're creating that environment where true innovation happens and we listen, boom, that's how it happens. So a bit of self-responsibility, call to action. Any leader out there, just never forget that amazing responsibility you've got to create that culture for all of those people in your community to flourish.
Yeah, you're so right. The biggest ripple comes from the head. You're very, very, very right. And I love how you reframed that. Actually, I loved how you reframed that.
It does. It can't be. We can't keep saying, like, I know 100 million people will just go, it's bad. It's never going to change. There's got to be rock stars out there who are prepared to go and do something a little bit different, be self-driven, find a way of moving this industry forward. But then equally, you cannot ignore the fact that, our leaders in schools all around the world are responsible for the narrative, the culture, that environment which allow these people to flourish. We've got major retention issues globally in education. I believe that fundamentally comes down to, because we're not listening to each other in the sector. And unless you create environments where people feel less listened, how can you feel empowered? So it's, I think it's, until we address this, I think the retention challenge is going to continue to rise, but it has to start with, why would you want to be in an environment where no one listens to you, right? You've got to be in that environment where people, you feel appreciated, you feel empowered. Start with that. Then I think we'd start to see a tide in a turn in the retention statistics. And I think you see a happier workforce, more vibrant workforce, people a bit braver with the ideas that they've got. It's a big journey. It's a big job. I don't think it's going to be done quickly.
Yeah. I tell you one thing I've noticed. So I've worked in schools. I'm a teacher, former teacher, and I've worked in the private sector as well. I've worked in ed tech. I've worked in now education media. So I've done a lot. Schools really have a way of, I don't know, it can be quite energy giving with the students. So when you're in the classroom, you've got boundless energy, the kids just make you happy. Well, that's what I found. They made me happy. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, there's so much that comes at you that can just like literally zap your energy. So I found when I left teaching and I was in another sector, I carried some of that, always talking about, oh my God, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And when I was reading your book, I realized that it's a remnant of my teaching days where I kept going, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, but I'm not saying it in a positive way. I'm saying it in a negative way. So I'm now officially a convert of the brilliantly busy club.
I don't know. I think it's a big debate. Should we have staff rooms? Should we have different kind of communities, a way that ideas could be heard? Because for people jumping into a staff room for the first time, quite intimidating, but you've got a lot of people with a lot of opinions in a particular room, particularly laggards. And it has that negative ripple. I would look at your staff room. Is that an environment where my teachers are going in and feeling empowered? Is that an environment where they're picking up energy to go make positive ripples? Or is it doing the complete reverse and reinforcing negative ripples, so that young teachers, or any teacher, forgive me, going into the education system for the first time, goes in with energy, within a term that energy is being zapped. By the end of the year, they're thinking about leaving. What's going on there? But that shouldn't be happening. And I think we've overlooked the importance of where that collective adult community meet. And so I would kind of make people just question that a little bit in the schools. How are they meeting? What are the conversations? Can we make it a bit more of an inspirational environment? Because if you pick it up, you're 21, 22, 23, 24, it's your first teaching job. Everybody's moaning about being busy. Everybody's pointing out all the negatives. You're gonna become them in no time at all.
It's so true. Oh my God. Because I can remember when I started teaching, I think I was like an NQT in North London, and I go to the staff room and then there are some teachers who are always there. Funny how busy you were. When I think back, I'm like, how are you always there? But they were though. And they were always saying the same things. Oh my God, I'm so busy. I can't even have time for a coffee. In retrospect, they were always having a coffee. So now you couldn't have been that busy because you were always there having a coffee. And I think it really does set you up to, you know, lose a lot of your momentum and lose a lot of your energy because you're not being fed positivity. These are not the people who are saying to you, guess what? There's a solution to the things you have to do. Are you prioritizing your time? Let me have a look at how you're blocking your schedule. How are you dealing with it? There's a better way. It's always, yeah, you know.
Imagine these places like you had like an ideas corner, like literally, I've just come out of my maths lesson. I've just tried this new look technique and the students absolutely loved it. And you've got a chemistry teacher, everything go, that's great. I'm going to try that in my lesson. Or you've got like a mentor corner, like you just want to talk to someone about you're having a bit of a tough day, and it could be anybody. And you kind of, like we talk about friendship benches for like our 4 or 5-year-olds. I'm kind of talking about the adult version of that. The problem is in this sector is that it's the only sector in the world where you have a timetabled approach to a day, right? So in the working space, you have meetings, but we don't all have our lessons where the bell goes all at the same time. So we all have our breaks and our lunches roughly the same time. Let's forget about free periods when we're doing our work. So you've got more collection of adults at similar time, same place. So the laggard in the room, or the negative Nelly, as I like to call it, can have such a damaging effect to a culture. So think about the staff room, but also for leaders. Like you probably could put everybody in your school into 4 different areas. Are they an innovator? Are they an early adopter? Are they a late adopter? And are they a laggard, right? I think there's 2 key parts of that. You know, everybody falls on that spectrum in some different way. I think it's really important to know who your innovators are in the school. And I think it's really important to know who your laggards are in a school. Your innovators can help you with the spread of innovation. They're your energy battens throughout the school. And your laggards, if you can pick them off and you could turn them into late adopters, or you can get them out of the laggard pot, then your culture can change within a term, right? So you probably could get your whole teams out, micro teams, head of department, look at your team. Everybody will sit on that radar at some point. So make sure you know who your innovators are. Make sure you know who the laggards are, and have a little bit of a strategy to try and bring them with you.
Yeah. All right. I just looked at my time and thought, my God, it's really gone. But I wanna get a couple of points in, and I want to ask you about it. Constantly, curiously creative, which is what we want our educators to be.
Yeah.
And I know we just talked about picking the laggards off, and I'm thinking, please don't shoot them. Just try and see how you
don't shoot them. Listen to why they're laggards. Listen to their opinions and try and bring them with you.
You said pick them off. I was thinking,
no, I'm going to pick them up. I didn't mean just get the paint gun out. I mean, go to find out why they're so grumpy and see if you can pick them off and bring them back with you.
Stop saying pick them off.
Sorry.
Can we say how we can reintroduce them into the fold? Pick them off. I'm getting all sorts of imagery. Yeah, we want our educators to be constantly curiously creative, the same way we want our students to be. But how do we foster that? I want some practical stuff, David. How do we?
See, one thing which fascinated me from what Google did 10, 15, 20 years ago was when they created Google Time. And it's that they gave people 20%. I know we can't do this right now. I'd be surprised if there's a school around the world, but there's elements of it we can take, right? Where they gave employees genuinely 20% of their time back each week, 1 day a week, and they could work on any project they wanted, as long as it could benefit the company in some way, but had to be nothing to do with their their job. I would genuinely, like, once we get on top of the marginal gains, some of the process improvements in place, like making sure everybody's got projects that they're working on beyond their job, which can improve the life of the school. But like, I'm not thinking, it's not a KPI, it's not a key performance indicator or a target. It's like just doing those small projects which can empower somebody. You can pick it, you can do whatever you like, as long as it helps this community move forward. That's number one. Number two, which is probably more practical and quicker, is getting carried away with the students in your school. So when you're doing creative projects and they're working on maybe new inventions or art or DT, or whatever it might be, you can get curious with them. You know, you don't always have to have the answers as a teacher, but you can jump into their projects, you know, particularly more creative hands-on projects, and do it with them, right? You know, if you're doing a business model around marketing and you're thinking about how would we market 8 billion ideas to the world, which is different from David and his team, and you're designing marketing posters, well, why don't you just do it with them? You know, get involved, show them your work, your ideas. So I'd say longer term, it'd be great to have more teacher-led projects. And I know that happens in a lot of schools to empower people, but in the short term, immediate thing is just get more curious and jump into some of the projects you're probably trying to empower your students with.
Yeah, our podcasts are normally 45 minutes long, between 35 and 45 minutes. And I've just looked at the time and thinking, but it's good. Teachers, you're listening to this to the end, aren't you?
They are. Well, go quick fire then. Go with you like.
Yeah. So my last couple of ones, because obviously I still want to talk about 8 billion ideas just a little bit, because I'm so fascinated by the name. I love marketing, can you tell? And that when you hear that, your curiosity alone will make you want to find out more about it. But we're not going there yet. I want to talk about not leaving, but building while you're alive, a legacy. I loved that section of the book. I thought people always talk about legacy in such a negative way. And when you wrote that, I thought, bing, yes, it's true. Because we attach it to death. Like, you're dead, your legacy, and that's it.
I agree. Legacy to me has always been, I've always found it fascinating, like how people don't think about it, and they always think about it too late in their life, and they get to the end of life and go, what have I achieved? And they can't actually remember. And I remember hearing that. I went to a funeral when I was 21, 22, and I was listening to the son talk about their dad who passed away. And this, you know, it was an amazing story of this person's life throughout the whole of their journey, what they had achieved, their accomplishments. It was just so inspiring. And then I remember going to another funeral, and it was like, they couldn't articulate what this person had lived for, what they stood for. And I just remember thinking, this is bonkers. And when I was interviewing people in my previous life who were coming into the department at IBM, so few people could actually articulate themselves on what they'd done beyond grades and very high level things in their job. And I was always the opposite, because I was like, I've got a job, I'm going to be doing this for the next chapter. I want to do as much as I possibly could. And for me, it was about building legacy at each point. And for teachers, it's like, I've done that 3 years in that school. What did you do in that school? Tell me about it. Not just in the classroom. I want to know the things, the projects, the external trips. Tell me your legacy and the impact. How did you make that a better school from when you started to when you left? And actually, when you chunk it up, you can look back really proudly over your careers. Like, it's really interesting in teaching, you go, just a teacher. What? You're the best job in the world. Oh, no, I've just been a teaching for 20 years. What have you done? Well, I worked in these 4 schools. All my days, you probably have thousands of children under your wings and inspired and made positive ripples. You can articulate it in such a different way. So I was a younger man, became inspired about it. And I just think to people, just constantly think about how you're making your schools better than they were when you weren't there, right? And so, and if you do that through your life, you suddenly look back and you're just really proud and you feel accomplished. And that's why I think it's really important people think about making their mark.
Yeah, and living your legacy right now, which is what I took away from it. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. 8 billion ideas. What happened to 7 billion ideas?
Well, pre-pandemic, we were called 7 billion ideas. We started because of this belief of connecting people with their own ideas, and when the planet's population was 7 billion. And prior to the pandemic, we effectively built a professional services company working in schools. Pandemic came, and it was like being punched in the face. But you couldn't see who was punching you, and suddenly you couldn't do any of the work. So you've given up your corporate safe job. You've lived off pennies. You're building up your understanding of the sector. You're building up your client base, and then it's like boom, it's like, oh my days. It was so difficult at the time. But it provided actually a really interesting opportunity for me as a business owner. And there's 4 things I did for the company, which I'm actually quite proud of looking at. I wrote down the 4 words, which were protect, opportunity, reflect, and plan the bounce back. The first was protect the business and the jobs, as many jobs as I possibly could at that particular time. Very, very hard thing to do for services companies around the world. The second was immediate opportunity. What could we do to serve our current schools and students who are in lockdown? The third came about 3 months after, which was reflect on what we had done as a business and what was good and what we could do better, and then plan to bounce back. And it was after a long run, and I was already thinking about 8 billion ideas. We're a couple of years down the line before, look, we're going to be so different post-pandemic. We're going to bring forward the rebranding. We're going to bring out different services and different ways that we could partner with schools out the world. And that's when the idea came to transition from that to what we are today. And now we feel so proud to be engaged with schools in the Middle East and around the world, inspiring students in different ways from our 4 to our 18, but fundamentally teaching entrepreneurship, career education, skills. And more recently, we formed a great partnership with a gentleman called Sir Clive Woodward and Apex to expand our work into the kind of performance and the well-being space. So it's been an incredible journey. It's been 2.5 years since I landed back from GES, February 2020. Most challenging period of my life, I would say, particularly that first year. But now I look forward and get really excited about the impacts and the dent that we can have on education in the years ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so, so much for your time, David. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you to you and to the schools that they're working in the Middle East. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. We love our partnerships, in particular working with your teachers and students, and long may that continue. And just thank you for having me. I know we've been a little bit longer, so hopefully it's been an interesting podcast. And if you get the time, read the book and just get in contact and let me know what you're taking away from it. I would love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to link David's contact, most likely his LinkedIn, etc., in the show notes of the podcast. But thank you very much for being on the pod. It's been absolutely brilliant. I know I shot over time. If you've listened to this point in the podcast, send me a message, send me an email. Let me give you a shout out on the next pod. Let me show my appreciation for your 60 odd minutes. I really appreciate your listenership. Teachers are brilliantly busy, and so I appreciate your time. Thank you so very much.